Imagine receiving a notice of dismissal by email just at the moment when your health is at risk. That's what happened to her. The physical pain of the disease, already so difficult to bear, was compounded by a feeling of betrayal, injustice, and a cruel question. How can someone be so impersonal with my life? But what you may not know is that this would not be a story of defeat. Instead of letting herself be consumed by anger or despair, she decided to write a response that would change everything. Not out of revenge, but out of dignity and courage. If you are going through a difficult time or have ever faced something that seemed like the end, perhaps this story shows that often the greatest new beginnings come in the most unexpected places. Stay until the end, because what follows will inspire you to believe that there is always a chance to start over, no matter what happens. And before we continue, if you identify with stories that touch the soul and want to leave an impact on people's hearts, subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming faith and transformation. Let's go together. At the beginning of the story, we will introduce the main character, who finds herself in the midst of a difficult fight against an illness. She is a strong woman, but like everyone, she has her weaknesses. As she tells her day-to-day life while facing physical suffering, the audience feels her pain and vulnerability. She trusts the company where she works, because she believes that mutual support is part of the purpose of her career. Her faith is what keeps her strong, and she still seeks hope amidst the fatigue and discomfort. Everything seems to fall apart when an email appears, an impersonal message of dismissal without prior notice while she is still hospitalized. Is it a stroke of fate or cruel irony? She thinks, feeling the feeling of betrayal spreading in her chest. She remembers all the moments of dedication, the sleepless nights, the projects delivered, the promises made that her work would be worth it. But, at that moment, what hurts the most is not the physical separation from work, but the indifference with which her health was treated. She looks at the screen of her cell phone, still in disbelief at what she has just read. Her stomach tightening with the feeling of helplessness. But inside her, a flame begins to ignite. In the hospital, with her veins marked by medication and her body tired, our character finds herself faced with the cruel reality of being fired without warning and without any empathy. The email, dry and direct, only brings the message that her services are no longer needed, without any consideration for her situation. She reads the words over and over, as if it were a farewell message without soul, without compassion. The feeling of betrayal is profound. They knew I was sick. They knew I was fighting for my life, she thinks, wondering if all her effort over the years of work meant nothing. Doubts begin to plague her mind. Am I just another number? Is my value only recognized as long as I am useful? At that moment, hope begins to disappear, replaced by anger and a sense of injustice. The pain of the disease is now accompanied by the pain of betrayal, which goes deeper than any medication could alleviate. But in the midst of this darkness, something inside her begins to stir. She remembers the words of her mother, who always told her, "Pain is inevitable, but the way you deal with it defines your future." Anger, however legitimate, could not be her only response. Anger only imprisoned her. She begins to feel a need to take control of the situation, to not let herself be consumed by pain, and, without knowing it yet, that is where her response is born. Still holding her phone, She takes a deep breath and decides that she will not be a victim of this story. Something inside her tells her that the turnaround is coming. Anger still consumes her, but an unexpected strength begins to grow in her heart. She knew she needed to take action, but she did not want to give in to anger. What would make a difference now? Anger or the right answer? She asks herself, reflecting on the impact that her attitude could have not only on her life, but also on those people who, in some way, had distanced themselves from her by simply clicking the send button. Anger would not define her. While still recovering, her mind begins to plan the response she would give to the company. She decides that her return would not be a simple acceptance of what happened, but rather a taking the reins of her own narrative. The idea of being a victim makes her feel even more fragile and powerless, and that is something she refuses. She begins to type the response with renewed purpose. She writes firmly, not a message of revenge, but of self-respect. It is not an apology for the situation, but a report on how dedicatedly she has always worked, and how her health should have been treated with more respect. She finally reclaims her voice, her dignity, and puts into words what many of her colleagues would never dare to express: the importance of respect, humanity, and consideration for others. She ends the email with a touch of faith. I believe that, in the end, everything we do comes back to us in some way. As she presses send, a mix of adrenaline and tranquility takes over her. She knew that what would happen next was beyond her comprehension, but she was ready. She could hardly have imagined that her decision to respond in a mature and dignified manner would begin to trigger a real turnaround. The next day, she receives a response from her boss, something she had not expected: an apology. The company, which had previously treated her with indifference, was now forced to face the consequences of its actions. The message from her boss was cautious, almost apologetic for the impersonal way in which the resignation email had been sent. I was unaware of your condition, and I deeply regret that our communication failed in such a way, the text read. Surprise and, in a way, a sense of justice filled the air. She did not want to be just another person who would spend her life in a cycle of discouragement and fear. Her response had been clear. I am more than this job, more than this difficult time. But what really touched her was not the apology, but the tone of genuine regret in the message. That initial soulless message was now immersed in an acknowledgement of error, something she never thought she would see. She realized that by not letting herself be consumed by anger, she had opened a door for empathy, which had been lacking until then, to begin to emerge. She knew that the situation was not yet resolved, but she was no longer the same woman. She had shown herself worthy of respect, and this would change her life in a profound way. As she reflected on the conversation, an even more powerful idea began to emerge in her mind. The change she so longed for was not just in the recognition of others, but in the internal transformation she was experiencing. With the apology message she received, she realized that the true power of the situation was not in how others treated her, but in how she chose to react. The pain of being fired, which seemed like an end, began to be seen by her as a new beginning. What seemed like a cruel stroke of fate now turns out to be an opportunity to grow and reinvent herself. She begins to realize that illness and dismissal are not the only factors that define her life. Her true value does not depend on a position or a company, but on her capacity for resilience and the inner strength that for so long she did not even know she had. The sleepless nights, fear and uncertainty have not disappeared, but she begins to understand that these moments of weakness can become sources of wisdom and strength. The faith that she carries, often overshadowed by the pressure of everyday life, now shines with greater intensity. She remembers the words that her grandmother used to say, "When life knocks you down, it is because God wants to show you the strength that you have not yet seen." That message from her grandmother, simple but profound, echoes in her mind, and she realizes that true transformation is happening within her. It does not matter what happens with the company, with her work, or with others. What matters is what she decides to do with this moment, how she chooses to grow from it. As she feels this wave of inner renewal, a new path opens up before her. She begins to make plans not only for her recovery from illness, but for the creation of something new, something she never imagined possible before. The inner transformation now begins to reflect in her actions. She decides not to let the fear of uncertainty stop her from seeking new horizons. Although she is still recovering, she begins to research, to learn about new areas of activity, and to believe, once again, that her purpose goes beyond a specific position or a company. The illness, which had weakened her physically, now becomes the catalyst for a new beginning. She signs up for online courses, reads books on self-discovery and personal development, and begins to look for a way to restructure her life and her career. As she progresses, she realizes that more than a simple professional restart, a personal reinvention is taking place. The woman who previously felt insecure and limited by her physical condition now feels capable of achieving something greater, of creating something that truly makes sense to her. She remembers an old piece of advice she had always heard from her mother. "Life will always give you more than you can carry, but it is your strength that will determine how much you can carry." She realizes that now, more than ever, she is ready to carry whatever life throws at her. Fear does not paralyze her, because faith and confidence in her own strength drive her to take courageous steps towards the future. With each small step taken, her self-confidence grows, and soon she comes across an opportunity that she never imagined would come her way so soon. What she never imagined begins to happen. After months of dedicating herself to new learning, and more importantly, to a new mindset, she receives a job offer. It is not just any job, but an opportunity that fits perfectly with her new aspirations and the direction her life has taken. The offer comes from a completely new field, but one that now makes perfect sense, given the path of self-discovery she had taken. When she reads the offer, her eyes light up, not with excitement about the offer itself, but with the certainty that she has been chosen for something greater. The position not only aligns with her skills, but with what she has learned about herself. She feels like this is the universe responding to her courage, to her faith in something beyond pain and loss. The fear of returning to the corporate world, the fear of not being up to the challenge, begins to dissipate. She understands that the true reward is not just the new job, but the confirmation that she is capable of overcoming any adversity. What seemed like an end, the impersonal dismissal, has become a milestone for a more meaningful journey. The company that fired her is now a distant reflection of who she was. She is no longer the same woman who felt helpless in the hospital. She accepts the offer, but this acceptance comes with a much deeper meaning. She knows that she is about to enter a new chapter, where she will finally take control of her destiny, completely. With the new opportunity in hand, she begins to see work in a completely different way. Now, success is not measured only by position or salary, but by internal satisfaction, by the purpose of each day. She arrives at her new job with a clear vision of who she has become, a woman who understands that true happiness lies in the journey and not in the destination. Over the first few weeks, she begins to apply everything she learned during her crisis. She brings with her a more human, more empathetic perspective, more connected to the values of respect, solidarity, and gratitude. Her work is no longer a constant struggle for external approval, but a path of continuous learning and personal transformation. She begins to stand out, not only for her technical performance, but for her authenticity and the way she deals with others in a more genuine way. However, the greatest reward is not only in professional victories. Her health, previously weakened by illness and stress, begins to improve as she finds balance and peace in her new rhythm of life. She learns to take care of herself, to respect her limits, and to prioritize herself, something that previously seemed impossible while trying to meet external expectations. She reflects on everything she has been through and smiles, knowing that, despite the difficulties, she has never been alone. A greater force has always been with her, guiding her every step of the way. Her journey finally reaches a point of true inner peace. She no longer seeks validation from others or immediate recognition. Her greatest reward now is a deep understanding of herself and clarity about what really matters. Looking back at the moment she was laid off and everything that followed, she smiles with gratitude. The path was hard, but each step led her to a place of greater wisdom, strength, and purpose. She understands that true victory is not in returning to her former self, but in completely reinventing herself and becoming a stronger, more authentic version of herself. The response she gave to the company, the time she spent recovering, the difficult choices she made to start over, all of this was necessary for her to fully discover herself. She realizes that each difficulty, each challenge, prepared her to be the woman she is now, and reflecting on everything that happened, she finally understands that true strength comes from within, from the ability to get back up when life knocks us down. She feels deep down that she has found her purpose, not in a job, but in the act of living with courage, faith, and gratitude. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever been through a moment of betrayal or despair, but found the strength to get back up? What would you do in her place, when the world seemed to have turned against you? The truth is that our greatest strength is not in how we get up, but in the courage to not give up. Sometimes the greatest challenges offer us the greatest life lessons, and what seemed like the end of everything can actually be the beginning of something much greater. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and a new beginning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire and transform. May you also find the power to move forward, no matter the adversity. Until next time.